Hello and welcome. This is Redesign. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Annegret Böhnemann. I'm a designer at For Junior Customers in Amsterdam, and with my team, I support organizations to create technology that is responsible towards people and the planet. We create the Redesign podcast to inspire and support listeners in their journey to do the same, to create more sustainable, respectful, and inclusive tech. Did you know that the digital technology we use is estimated to consume 7% of the global electricity? It takes a tremendous amount of energy to create and power our devices, the data centers, and the related infrastructure behind. And on top of that comes the usage. So, what and how much we actually do with this infrastructure. Or, in other words, every email that you send, every search that you make online, every website that you open requires some energy and adds to the internet's global footprint. Depending on how environmentally conscious a website is designed, this is then more or less energy and it's more or less in your control. Ergo, every organization that runs a website or offers other digital products or services carries a responsibility too, and has a choice to design with the planet in mind or not. This time at Redesign, I'm joined by no one else than Tom Greenwood, the author of the book Sustainable Web Design and founder of Whole Grain Digital, an agency based in London. With his agency, Tom has been busy making the internet greener for 15 years already, designing and developing websites that are considerate of the environmental impact. Before we welcome Tom, please note that this conversation was recorded online. We did our best in post-processing to reduce any technical issues and to improve your experience while not compromising the authenticity of the conversation. Enjoy listening. There we go. Hi, Tom. How are you doing?
I'm great, thanks.
That's very nice to know. I would like to ask, can you maybe give a little bit of information of who you are and what you do?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Tom Greenwood and I run a web design agency in the UK called Whole Grain Digital, which is a design and development agency that specializes in working with organizations doing something positive in the world. And we have a particular focus on trying to reduce the environmental impact of digital technologies. And on that front, I'm also the author of a book called Sustainable Web Design.
Nice, thank you. So now it's 2022 and we've 15 years after you founded the agency. How was the start of this new year for you and what do you take into it from the past?
I think there's some big changes going on at the moment. I think we've seen, I'm going to be optimistic. I'm always on this line between like optimism and pessimism, but I'm going to be optimistic this year that, I think after COP being quite of a flop last year in Glasgow, I think actually there's a lot of good stuff happening and people feeling like, okay, we need to take climate action into our own hands and so on. And I'm particularly seeing that in the digital sector where loads of companies are starting to like really prioritize the issue of sustainability in their business operations and the work they do and the type of clients they work with. And so I think there's some positivity in the air for the year ahead.
That's very nice. I hope that lasts long.
I hope it'll last forever.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So, okay. So now you're in the role of the managing director of Whole Grain Digital.
Yeah.
Was there any sort of recent moment that opened your eyes and that now helps you to manage the agency towards a specific direction?
So I think a specific moment for me was a few years ago. So we've always had an aim as a company to try and like create a positive impact in the world, and that's part of why we started a company in the first place. But I think we struggled to like find like exactly where we could have the biggest impact and where we could really focus our energy until a few years ago when I came across the issue of like digital emissions, which is a thing that most people have never heard of. I'd never heard of it. I'd run a digital agency for 10 years and thought digital technology has no environmental impact. And it's part of the reason why we were a digital agency, because we wanted to sort of embrace this technology that could do all these good things without any downsides. and basically, when I looked into the issue as a sort of a validating exercise to, after 10 years, like, oh, maybe I should look into this and check it out, I found that actually digital technology has a huge environmental impact, and it really changed everything for us as a company, and changed everything in terms of my sort of leadership of the company, that this is something that we need to really learn about, we need to educate the rest of the industry about, we need to figure out how to apply it in our own work and find solutions and share those solutions. And that's become like a real core focus for us as a company over the last four or 5 years, really.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting that you made me remember a situation where I surely didn't know about the environmental impact of the internet. That was in one of my first jobs. I was asked from a colleague to copy some papers. So I was standing in this little room, maybe a square meter or two, with the smell of the laser printer in the air. And with my colleague, we discussed, or we wondered, what if we were actually not to copy these papers, but send them via email? Wouldn't that be so much more environmentally friendly?
Exactly.
And yeah, this sort of makes me think, what would have a Tom Greenwood responded to me back then in that situation if he was present and if he had the knowledge from right now?
Well, yeah, I mean, with the knowledge that I had like years ago, I would have said, yes, you're right, let's do it, let's get rid of all the paper. And that is right to some extent. I think the big challenge with this sort of dematerialization of physical products and services is that on a like for like basis, digital technology is nearly always far more efficient. So sending a copy of a digital document is far more efficient than physically copying a paper document, and you've got to cut down trees and manufacture paper and
send it by mail
and all the transportation throughout the whole process and so on. Massively more efficient to do it digitally. The difference is that the volume of things that we copy digitally is so much higher because it's so easy and it's free. It's near enough free. So actually, it's not a like-for-like comparison, because for every one document we would have photocopied, we're probably copying hundreds of digital documents.
Right. So do you think it has to do also with our awareness of just sort of sending things, uploading them into the cloud, but not actually sort of knowing what the impact thereof is?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's partly just convenience, that when things are sort of quick, easy, and cheap, we consume more of them, whatever that happens to be. But partly also because it's invisible, we're not aware, we don't think twice about just making more copies and storing them in multiple places, and we never go and do that housekeeping. If you've got like a room full of filing cabinets and they're all full and there's paper stacking up everywhere, you think, oh my goodness, like we need to clear some of this out, recycle some of this paper. Whereas with digital, we almost never do it. We just keep storing more and more and more and more things. So over time, the amount of data in the world being stored is sort of growing exponentially, and there's no way that it ever reduces, because nothing's set to nothing has an expiry date on it. It's not like all of your apps basically have a thing built in that says, well, if you don't tell us otherwise, we're going to delete everything after 2 years or 5 years or whatever.
Right. And with all the technology evolving further, actually, it also needs more space, right? Because if you think back then, we had the floppy disk, which would save how much? Right?
1.4 megabytes.
Right. Yeah. And nowadays you just have easily a hard drive of a few gigabyte or even terabyte in your laptop.
Exactly.
It's quite insane.
Everything gets bigger and bigger. And, the floppy disk analogy is really interesting because, in the days of floppy disks, you could have like multiple software programs on one floppy disk sometimes, and you could have like a floppy disk with 10 games on it. Whereas now, like a typical web page, just a web page, often won't fit on a single floppy disk, which is crazy. And we're, how many web pages do we visit in a day?
Wow. How many floppy disks would it need to save the entire internet on?
Billions.
Millions. Okay, so you started on a journey of making the web a bit greener in a sense. But then also when I look into your more recent articles and conversations, you use the word regenerative a bit more often, which is sort of a term that is being added to the long list of carbon neutral, green, sustainable, circular, and so forth. I would like to ask you, in the context of digital tech, what does regenerative actually mean?
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant question. So I think in the general context of just what does regenerative mean, if we start there, I mean, it means that well, first of all, I think we should accept or acknowledge that everything we do as humans is somehow having some sort of negative impact on the natural environment as modern humans. And therefore everything we do in business is also having some sort of potentially negative impact.
Yeah.
What I mean when I use the term regenerative in this context is that the things that we're doing as a team, as a group of people, are doing more to help nature regenerate itself than the harm that we're doing. I think we've got to accept that there is harm being done, but somehow we're actually helping it give it space to regenerate itself. And in terms of the digital side of things, that's very, very difficult. Like, you can't get away from the fact that, like, digital technology, as virtual as it might sound, it sounds like it's in the cloud, it's just vapors, but it's real hardware. There's servers in data centers made out of materials that were dug out of a quarry somewhere and shipped around the world, and energy was consumed, and all of these things. There's real physical impact that we can't really get away with, as well as like the electronic waste that we produce when all these devices get thrown away. But I think as a company, what we can do is two things. One, like, the skills that we're using are supporting organizations that are actually promoting environmental protection and regeneration projects. So we're helping actually promote them and help them succeed. And then we're also redirecting profits from the company, or not even profits, but revenue from the company to support those charities that are doing those projects. And if possible, maybe going and physically helping them as well. But kind of accepting that there is, like, they're not directly the same thing.
Right.
If we could directly mean that our work in digital was like helping nature restore itself in a direct way, that would be the dream. But I think, at least at this stage, until we figure out another way, we have to kind of accept that they're slightly disconnected. It's like, we're going to try and do good work over here that is having a low negative impact and supporting good projects, while also funneling kind of revenue towards things that are really, really doing good and helping nature restore itself.
So in a sense, it's about balancing the good and the harm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So when you speak about regenerative, how do you now look back at your former usage of the word sustainable or sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, all of these words I have issues with, and I always I always kind of feel like, well, I've got to use some words, but they all have their issues. I mean, so my former use of the word sustainable, which I still use, I do think that as a general principle, the way that we behave as a society, and that includes both our personal lives and the way that we, operate as organizations, has to be compatible with, like, long-term human survival, and which means long-term health of our ecosystems. And so really that's what I mean by sustainable, is that if we keep on doing this, we'll still be able to carry on doing it in another 1,000 years' time. In reality, though, I think the trouble is that the way that we use sustainable tends to mean incrementally less harmful. And it rarely actually means, if you actually ask the question, if we carried on doing this, could we still be doing it in 1,000 years' time? The answer is nearly always no, which means it's not sustainable.
That's true, right?
Yeah.
Well, so what I realized is that you also started looking at the topic more broadly over the years. And with that, I mean, for instance, you with Whole Grain Digital, you support the Sustainable Web Manifesto. And in there, you also mention a lot of principles that go beyond being just green, so to say. So you look into topics like privacy, transparency, resilience, well-being. What is it that made you consider also those topics?
Yeah, sure. So the Sustainable Web Manifesto has 6 key principles, which is clean and efficient, so clean energy, or non-environmentally toxic energy and materials. Efficient, as in let's use these materials and resources efficiently. Open, honest, resilient, and regenerative.
Right.
The open and honest part got included because we realized that there is so much, basically a lack of transparency in the industry, which is a real blocker for any kind of sustainability initiatives. Like how much energy is really used in a data center? Like there's lots of estimates, but when it comes down to it, nobody really knows except the people who work inside those data centers, who are not allowed to publish it, right? so there's a lack of transparency, as well as, in many cases, a lack of honesty. There's a lot of greenwashing around kind of corporate pledges of various kinds of making everything green and wonderful, but actually, like, is it really true? So those things seemed important from the point of view that we need that culture to support actually making things cleaner and more efficient. And then the resilience aspect was added because there's also a kind of going back to this sort of the true meaning of sustainability, there's also a kind of a two-way relationship between digital technology and humans from a sustainability point of view. Like, we want to make sure that the technology is not having too much of a harmful effect on the environment, but actually, as like the ecological crisis deepens, that has a feedback loop where it impacts digital technology. So, for example, as the planet warms up, data centers are going to need more energy to cool themselves down. As sea levels rise, telecoms networks are going to be more impacted by flooding. As we have more and more extreme weather, like, hurricanes and storms, sort of power systems and telecoms masts and things like this, which are part of the infrastructure of the internet, are going to be damaged and impacted. So the resilience is about, okay, well, let's also think about how climate change is going to impact digital technology and how we can design it to try to be more robust in the future, so that critical services, and I think it's important to say critical services, it doesn't matter if somebody can't access their online bingo or something, but but critical services need to be accessible in times of need. So if there's a storm, like if there's a hurricane, then that's the time at which people need to be able to access the weather reports and the news to know what's happening, and possibly like GPS, or contact their friends and family to tell them whether they're okay or they need help, or contact emergency services and find directions to the hospital. And these sorts of things are super critical in those most extreme situations. So we need to design digital technology to be able to survive the worst.
It's super interesting. So you mentioned that transparency is one of the big obstacles in this, that sort of like companies don't know, or individuals as well don't know how much data is being used, for instance. What other obstacles or challenges do you experience in your work to actually make this happen?
Sure. So I think one of the big barriers is lack of awareness. So most people are aware, even if they don't have a lot of interest, they're aware that the energy we consume at home causes pollution if it comes from a power station. They're aware that our vehicles we drive have an impact on the environment. They're aware that like the packaging on the products we buy has an impact on the environment. So that base awareness is there in society, and you can kind of start a conversation from that point. In the digital world, the biggest barrier is that awareness is almost non-existent. I mean, most people are starting from the point of digital technology has zero environmental impact. So before we have any conversation about how do we reduce the environmental impact, we need to have a conversation about the fact that there is one. So I think that's probably one of the biggest barriers in terms of actually doing work in this field. Particularly with clients or suppliers, they don't necessarily want to engage in something that they don't relate to, that they're not aware of. So we need to take them on that journey. The other big barrier, and I'll be honest with you, this is the one that's got me stumped, I really don't have a solution to it, is there's a feedback loop in society where the more efficient we make things, the more we use them. There's a concept called Jevons's paradox, and it's this concept that I think in his day it was steam engines. It was like, the more efficient we make steam engines, we'll be saving coal, because each individual steam engine uses less coal to do the same amount of work. But his theory was that as as we make them more efficient, people will use more steam engines because they'll think, well, now I can power 2 machines with the same amount of coal.
Nice idea, but
nice idea, but and he obviously came up with this concept like in the Industrial Revolution, and it's basically played out with pretty much every technology that's come since. That every time we make them more efficient, we actually end up consuming not just equal, but in the long term, we end up consuming even more because we kind of overshoot each time. So that's kind of true with digital technology, that when the internet is getting more energy efficient, every year data centers get more energy efficient, devices that we use at home get more energy efficient, the telecoms networks get more energy efficient all the time. But the sheer amount of digital technology that we're using outpaces the improvements, the gains in efficiency. So
wow. So now a bit of a personal question maybe, but do you ever suffer from climate anxiety? Like having all that in your everyday work, I wouldn't be surprised if you were overwhelmed from time to time by the totality of this issue.
Yeah, I do. I mean, like I said at the beginning, I tend to live life with sort of 1 foot in optimism and 1 foot in I live life on that line, 1 foot either side. And I'm generally a fairly positive person, but it is very concerning. And sometimes when you actually look at the issues on a kind of a broad sense, it can be quite overwhelming, because the solutions, sometimes it's nice when you've got easy solutions. It's like, okay, let's all like drive less and change our light bulbs and eat less meat and whatever it might be. And then
but then the wicked problems.
The wicked problems, then you're like, oh gee, how do we solve this? Yeah.
How do you keep yourself in balance, or how do you manage your own well-being in there?
I think generally just by practicing trying to be in the present and really bring myself back to the present. That you can get super overwhelmed by thinking about the future and what might happen. But actually, most of the time, even if you're not having a very good day, most of the time, actually, if you look at it and you're honest with yourself, you think, you know what, things are pretty good right now.
Okay.
And that's kind of like how I tend to bring myself back. And part of that, I think, is like sometimes just shutting yourself off from those kind of external things and saying, I don't need to read about more of these issues right now, and I don't need to like necessarily discuss them.
Fresh input on how bad it is.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like, I know sometimes you got to say, like, I know enough, I'm gonna go and just enjoy like being in my garden or something. Yeah.
I'm curious. So I'm also working as a designer, and in design thinking, whether digital or not, we usually apply this framework of, we are searching for the sweet spot between viability, feasibility, and desirability. What do you think of adding the layer of responsibility into this, or like considering it in some other dimension?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we have to, and I mean, that was really kind of what got me interested in design, right back at the beginning, many years ago, was this idea that like responsibility could be a core pillar of design, and that actually the work that we're doing as designers is solving real problems. It's not just creating more stuff so that people can make more money. It's actually like, design in its best form is solving real problems in the world.
Grab the wicked problems and do something about them.
Yeah, exactly. And then and find solutions to them. And solutions that don't just solve that problem, but they do it in a way that people want to kind of embrace those solutions. So I think it has to be one of the kind of core pillars of design practice. I think the big challenge is just the conflict of interest with commercial interests. And often, even lots of companies, even that sort of want to pursue more socially and environmentally responsible practices, when it comes down to it, they have a requirement to generate revenue every year. If they're a publicly floated company, then they've got a responsibility to make profit for shareholders. And and so there is this kind of this hamster wheel of society where it's like, even if the designers are doing the right thing, and even if the companies in terms of their ethos are trying to do the right thing, there's still the other, this is the next wicked problem, right? That we're stuck on the hamster wheel of like, but we've got to sell at least as much stuff next year as we did this year. So somehow we have to find a way of making people buy stuff.
Yeah.
And
so who do you think should be responsible in an organization to design and create sustainable products and services?
Who should be responsible for doing the design?
And not for doing the design, but for taking decisions that are sustainable and responsible.
I see. I think the responsibility has to come right at the top level of an organization. I think that if it doesn't get the backing from the top, then ultimately somehow other interests are going to kind of get prioritized. So, I think in a way there's a sort of a two-way thing where I think in order to get the people at the top to prioritize it, you need this sort of grassroots kind of movement of designers and anybody working in the process of saying, look, these are the things we need to be focusing on, and we can do amazing things, and it'll be good for us as an organization, and show what those opportunities and solutions might look like, and then get the buy-in, but then up from the top. But then ultimately the buy-in from the top has to be sincere. It's got to be real,
right?
So that, because what I've seen too many times is where the people at the top make like marketing statements to say, yes, we're in support of all these good things, but then when push comes to shove and they have to make a tough decision, they're like, oh no, actually just forget that, we'll go with the thing that makes
the nicer numbers.
Right, yeah, short-term numbers as well.
Also,
like this quarter's profits or this year's profits or whatever. So yeah, I think we need leadership who can make some tough decisions and sometimes accept that you've got to make you got to have long-term strategies. You can't always focus on short-term.
I still find it interesting, though, what as an individual you could do, right? Me and my team at For Junior Customers, we sort of developed a framework with which we try to bring in the ethical dimension into the design decisions. So one thing that I do when I design is I go through sort of not a list, but through some self-reflection questions like, well, how energy efficient is the site actually? Or am I using imagery and video that is actually useful for the user? Did I reduce the size, etc.? I wonder, like, what are your favorite self-reflection questions when you go into projects?
Sure. I think one of my favorites is this necessary? If you really had to, like, imagine you were in court and you had to like argue why this thing needs to be there. Sometimes you realize that actually you don't necessarily have like a really solid case. And I think often design that's good for people and the planet is sort of follows minimalist principles of less is more. So I like to ask that one. And a kind of a similar question is just, can we achieve the same thing with less by thinking about it in a different way?
Right.
And then another one, I guess, which is sort of more people focused, is it's just like, how will this impact people's health? And I know that like maybe that seems a bit kind of unrelated to like digital stuff, but you can see, particularly in the world of software, particularly social media, like mental health is like a massive issue, and there are designer decisions being made at every stage that could have a positive effect, could have a negative effect. And I guess this is the interplay between the people who are like on the ground doing the work, doing the design, and the people and the kind of the sort of senior leadership. Because on the one hand, you've got people who can make those positive decisions, sort of lots of positive decisions on a daily basis, and can have a really good positive effect. And I think there's huge opportunity for that. Really, the job of like the senior leadership is to not sabotage that. Right. Is to let the good people do the good work and do the good things. Because I think most designers, most developers, most normal people doing any role within a project, probably wanted to have a positive impact on
Mm-hmm.
people, on society, on the environment, and actually, you know, they'll do their best within their own knowledge to kind of move things in that direction. I think often the problem is that you'd get kind of senior management sometimes coming in and sabotaging that, where they say, yeah, but this feature that you're saying that we should have maybe is going to mean that people watch less videos, or, you know.
So how do you respond to a leader that is sort of sabotaging or blocking your way forward?
I mean, it can be challenging. I think it really depends on the situation. I think one of the things is to try and understand what really matters to them and not assume that they care about the same things. Sometimes they do, but I think that's part of trying to understand them. You know, if they care about the same things, then yes, like take them on that journey of educating them why the solutions that you're putting forwards are actually in everyone's best interests. But if they're not on the same page and they care about completely different things, then I think actually finding ways of putting it in their language and showing them that, you know, actually, like this might be good from your point of view as well. I mean, like, for example, in the work that we do, often making websites, in fact, most of the things you do to make a website more energy efficient, will also deliver like commercial benefits, that you'll make things faster. If you make things faster, then you know, people are happier, they buy more things. I mean, you know, or they're more likely to engage or like sign up for your newsletter or whatever it is that you want them to do. They're more likely to do it if you make things fast and easy. So that's kind of
an entrance point, so to say.
An entrance point, yeah. So and often, like, you know, there might be a reputational thing where it's like, okay, like we could, yeah, maybe we can make a compromise now, and that would make us a bit more money right now, but actually, like, there's going to be a reputational value for us really doing the right thing over the long term, and like sell it to them in that way, that like the company or the organization is going to be served better in the long run. Yeah.
So 15 years ago, you started with whole grain digital, and now you're designing for sustainability, for regeneration, and so forth. How did your job change with that? So how does the design process differ if it looks at sustainability or not?
So I guess the key differences in the design process are, I mean, you're still looking at all the same fundamental things. The key differences in the design process are that you are going at it with this sort of more of an attention to detail and an understanding of what the impact of those details are. So, you know, traditional web design is, for lack of a better word, it's relatively superficial. It's like, let's make things look nice. Let's make things look pretty, make them exciting, and hopefully people will fall in love with it, and and they'll do whatever it is we want them to do, whether it's learn something or buy something or whatever. I think when you apply the kind of the sustainability lens, what you're doing is saying, okay, yeah, like, of course, people want things to look nice, and we want things to be, you know, easy to use and so on. Like, all of those same things still apply, but actually we want to, like, it's exactly what you're saying. It's like this pillar of responsibility. In this case, it's like a pillar of efficiency. Is equally important. So every time you're making that decision of saying, okay, but like, why don't we put this thing in the middle of the page? It's like, okay, but what's it for? Like, what value is it generating? And how is that going to have, what are the side effects? I mean, that's one of these questions. What are the side effects? So yes, it might be nice that we have a video in the middle of the page, and maybe that will help communicate information better and tell a story. And, you know, there's many potential good impacts, but then it's like, but is it going to slow things down? Is it going to consume more energy? Is it going to be hard for people to load on a mobile device? You know, you're looking at the other side of it as well, of looking at the side effects. And if you do that at every stage, and you have a reasonably good way of quantifying it, doesn't have to be exact, but if you kind of know, like, well, actually, if we did this, it's going to increase the amount of energy consumed by, you know, 10% roughly, or it's going to slow the website down by, you know, 20% or something, you might look at it and be like, okay. So I think that having that knowledge and of what the potential side effects might be, being able to roughly kind of add them up, and having that attention to detail to like look at every little thing and saying, okay, but
right,
how can we do this better, drives quite big improvements. It's a lot of little things.
Does it take more effort than before? Would you say now, let's say, are you charging your clients more? Do you say this project takes longer because we make it sustainable?
Yes and no. So I think it certainly at first it took us longer because there was a learning curve,
right,
for us, and I think that would be true for any team that's learning something new. Then it always takes you a bit longer to begin with. I think once these things become second nature, you can kind of spot where the issues might be quite quickly, and you also know what the possible solutions might be. You can offer alternatives because you've done things in the past. So I think there's the additional effort and time and cost reduces massively once you've kind of got a bit of experience. But in terms of do we charge our clients more? That's a funny question. I think no, we don't really charge our clients. I think, we're sort of roughly, well, we have to be cost competitive with people who are selling the same types of things as us, because we're normally kind of winning projects in some sort of tender process where there's multiple agencies pitching for the work. So we've got to be in the same ballpark. It might not be exactly the same. But that said, we are in the market where we're doing relatively premium work. We're doing bespoke design and development, and I think people would expect to be paying for attention to detail at that end of the market. It's like if you were paying somebody to build you a custom design house, you'd think, well, yeah, okay, I want you to focus on the details and get them right, because there's a reason I'm not just buying a generic house. But I think the challenge comes more at the kind of the cheaper end of the market, where, in fact, it's the middle end of the market. The really cheap end of the market is very much templated. So you've got things like Squarespace and Wix, for example, and actually, you make things efficient in once, and thousands or tens of thousands of websites benefit from that. So that's actually relatively easy, and there's no real cost to people for that, because the cost of making the improvement was so small relative to the thousands of people using it. It's the middle of the market that's really struggles with this, I think. So it's the sort of cheap bespoke web projects, because then you're kind of inherently in the territory of we're doing it once. There's no economy of scale, but we've got cost as our core constraint, so we'd have to cut some corners somewhere.
What would you recommend to somebody starting out in this field? Somebody who wants to pick up sustainability as a topic at work.
In general, sustainability as a general concept. I'm thinking, sorry, my mind is stuck in design. From a designer's point of view, I would say to read The Green Imperative by Victor Papanek, which is it's really old now. He wrote it, I think, in the 90s. It was the last book he wrote. And I think it just beautifully kind of sets out what responsible design is. And all of the case studies, it's fascinating how, even though a lot of the case studies seem quite dated now, all of the principles that he's talking about
are the same.
Nothing's changed. And even a lot of the solutions that he's talking about are the same solutions we're talking about now. And, some of them, they're talking about, potential solutions like powering the world with renewable energy being only 10 years away. And, and you think, oh yeah, well, that's kind of what people are saying now. It's 2030.
Are you sure about this recommendation? Maybe it's more frustrating to read this and see nothing has happened.
Well, yeah. I mean, there are some frustrations like that. But honestly, he was a real visionary, and I think he's a real kind of great designer of his generation. And I think it's a really good starting point for just kind of getting into the mindset of how do you approach design projects with this
mindset,
responsibility mindset. Yeah.
Nice. Viktor Papanek is definitely a good choice to search for inspiration. I very much agree. Is there maybe anybody else you look up to?
Yeah. So Victor Papanek, I'm a big fan of. I think sort of in a commercial context, Yvonne Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia, is a real visionary who has really kind of challenged, I guess, the whole ethos of business in a broad sense, but not just environmentally, but also socially, about like what is the role of a business in society. And I think he's been quite honest over the years about the fact that he doesn't have all the answers. At the end of the day, like he's ended up with this like $1 billion company that produces loads of stuff. And I think on some level that kind of bothers him. But that's sort of, why he's quite inspirational, because he's really thinking it through and asking these questions and, doing a lot of really pioneering things in terms of investing money back into researching new materials and ways of recycling things and trying to create markets for like secondhand products and trying to see how they can like give their staff a better life and like better quality of life with their families and so on. And, really look at it kind of holistically rather than just as a corporation trying to make profit. Yeah.
Tom, I think I could ask questions forever, but there's maybe only one last question I would like to ask, which is what one thing would you like listeners to take away from this conversation?
I think what I'd like them to remember is that digital technology is not virtual. It's very much physical, and it has an environmental impact equivalent or greater than the aviation industry. So we need to put that on the table and start talking about it.
Even during Corona?
Well, yeah, I mean, it actually overtook aviation during the pandemic because people were flying less, and then we've all like gone to home working and video calls, and everything's gone digital to an even greater extent. So yeah.
Thanks a lot, Tom.
Great, thank you.
And for those that listened in, we hope that you enjoyed. If you'd like to hear more, you can subscribe online on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or also Google Podcast. If you'd like to know how responsible design could benefit you and your customers, please reach out to us. And also, if you have tips for new guests, ideas, or topics, let us know. You can find our email in the description of this episode. Till then, have a nice day.